Hi, I'm Dr. Tom Lewis, founder of Real Health Innovations. I'm a medical scientist with credentials from the Harvard School of Public Health and a degree from MIT. Real Health Innovations is a health creation company. We help people prevent, slow, stop, and reverse chronic diseases. Today I'd like to tell you about how calories get converted to fat and how you can stop that process. So if you look at this chart, the first thing you have to look at is the green lines. Between these green bars is how much energy we're using on a moment-by-moment basis. So at the lower level, we're still using energy even when we're sleeping. Our brain is still working, our heart is still beating, our circulation is still going. So we're using some baseline energy, and then when we're exercising, we're using energy more up in this range. Anytime we go over our energy demand requirements for that moment, we will place that excess energy into storage. It's an evolutionary thing. We were designed for feast and famine. When we feasted, but our body still only needed so many calories, so whatever excess we had either went to waste or went to storage. What's happening today is we're going through this cycle of feast and famine literally many times a day rather than a few times per year. So the consequences is whenever we go over our immediate calorie needs, these calories go someplace. Let's look at the next slide. So why we get hungry is when we go above our energy demand needs, there's a lag in the production of insulin. And insulin's job is to find and pull and deliver sugar to our cells. So what happens is we have a short-term burst of calories from a fuel that's very fast at getting into our bodies, sugary or high glycemic foods. And so we see this peak, insulin comes to the rescue to move it out of our blood supply into our cells. Our cells only need so much, but the insulin stays up high, so the sugar continues to be transported, but not into the cells, into our liver and into fat, and we become hungry. So very quickly we have breakfast, and because of this cycle, we need to have a snack, particularly if it's a high sugar food. So next slide. So what happens over time is as we continue to try to push fuel into our cells, but our cells are running along nicely with a modest amount of fuel. Think of our cells as being a diesel engine, not a jet fighter plane. Eventually says, enough is enough. This is a healthy body with good insulin receptors, so the amount of glucose in our blood gets transported in a balanced way inside our cells. But as we flood our exterior of our cells with too much glucose, the insulin receptors shut down and say, okay, we're not allowing this much sugar into our cells, we don't need it. So it's a vicious cycle. So there's a way to overcome this problem, and that's shown on the next slide. So let's just look at three different types or three different scenarios. One, we take something high glycemic, and that simply means sugary. So whether it's a candy bar or even a potato, which puts a high charge of sugar in our blood very quickly, we see this spike followed by this crash. And it's particularly exacerbated on an empty stomach where the only food we have is something that's absorbed and metabolized very rapidly. The next we see a modestly high glycemic food, bread, rice, pasta, potato, where we still see the spike, but then we see the crash as insulin goes up in response to that fuel. And this can happen over a period of 1 to 3 hours. So after 3 hours of eating a high glycemic food, we're hungry again and we reach for the snack. Now this last curve is something that's considered low glycemic. So that would be healthy fats, fish, meats, certain types of vegetables that are absorbed more slowly. And the point is fats, whether they're vegetable fats or animal fats, tend to slow absorption. So let's compare this yellow curve with the blue curve. Here the blue curve meets our energy demands completely and there's no spillover to fat. What is the difference in these two? Let's just call this a baked potato. Let's call this a baked potato with butter and sour cream. Now I'll admit, the area under the curve, the blue curve, is much greater than the area under the yellow curve. There are more calories here, but the distribution of the calories more meets with our energy demand needs, so we have less spillover into fat. So what I'm saying is, yes, baked potato with butter causes less weight gain and better meets our metabolic needs than the baked potato alone. Next slide. What's really critical to understand is if you're taking in foods and your brain isn't being satisfied, and the brain needs 10 times more energy than regular cells, think about it. Our brain's a very small part of our body, about 2.5% the mass of our body. Yet we have this huge artery delivering all kinds of blood flow to our brain. Our brain is a huge consumer of energy. If you don't feed your brain, you'll always be hungry. So the biggest losers can lose the weight. They can force themselves to go on calorie restriction, but they're at the expense of the health of their brain. So the brain will override that signal with time. So the best way to lose weight and to be healthy is to feed your brain along with all the rest of your cells. So on the next slide, here are nutrients that the brain really loves, or sources of nutrients. So broccoli and the green vegetables, antioxidant vegetables like berries, nuts, high in nutrients, high in minerals, high in healthy fats that the brain feeds on, vitamin C containing foods. Here we have avocados with a bunch of vitamins and minerals, but more importantly, healthy fats. Our brain thrives on fats. You provide the good healthy fats, your brain won't be hungry, your body won't be hungry, and it down-regulates inflammation. The fish, and so on and so forth. So, simple weight loss formula. Limit carbs and sugar intake. Why? Carbs and sugar in particular spike your glucose, create that spike that's followed by insulin, which leads to the conversion into fat. Consume high nutrient density foods. This will feed your brain and make your body less hungry. Increase healthy fats. It's also brain foods. So what I really say is, don't be insulted if someone calls you a fathead. That means you have a good, healthy brain. My name is Dr. Tom Lewis, founder of Real Health Innovations. Our goal is to help you prevent chronic diseases, and one way to do that is to feed your brain. Thank you very much.